Okay, we can begin. All the best.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Anupama Pindapudi, student of PGPEM 2021. Welcome you to the first meet of Leader Speak series in collaboration with Center for Capital Markets and Risk Management, IIM Bangalore. Our guest this evening is one of the LinkedIn top voices in 2020, has been featured in ET's 40 Under 40, and is one to start the India's first domestic hedge fund. She graduated from some of the finest schools in the world and describes herself as a global citizen. She is India's only female CEO of an AMC who also finds magic in words and can win at a game of bridge. She believes and often advises people to celebrate one's perfections, imperfections, and everything in the middle, because that's what makes their story their own and unique. You all probably know her as the girl with broken neck. Let's welcome Ms. Radhika Gupta, the girl on mission with wings of fire, in her own words. Thank you, ma'am, for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Vishal and the entire team of IIM Bangalore. Very honored to spend this evening with you.
We are equally honored. And I'll just pass it on to our co-host and junior coordinator, Industrial Relations Committee, a student of 2021 PGPEM batch, Vishal Vadas.
Vishal, you're on mute actually.
Thank you, Anupama. Thank you for the introduction. And I welcome you, ma'am, for our first session, the Leader Speak series, which we have organized along with jointly the PGPM batch is organizing with the CCMRM. So, ma'am, as Anupama had mentioned, like there are so many accolades, and the latest one is definitely featuring in ET's 40 Under 40. But we would actually want to know, like, your entire journey from, say, India to Wharton, and then what prompted you to be back to India, which is like a reverse journey, coming back from US to India, leaving a glamorous job at McKinsey and starting your first hedge fund.
Okay, so I think, parts of my journey for those who've seen videos is known, but I'll repeat maybe a few lines of it, and maybe I'll spend a little more time on the move from US to India, because I think that's very important in the context of the world we live in today also. So I grew up in a very interesting and unconventional background, because my father represented India abroad. Now this meant I grew up in various different countries around the world, starting with Pakistan, then the US, and a lot of Africa. Actually, we lived in Nigeria and Zambia. I did my high school in Europe, and then I decided to study abroad, and I was the first one in the family who decided to go abroad for a foreign education, and it was pretty unconventional at the time. And I was obviously a huge beneficiary of getting large amounts of financial aid, because I'm ultimately the daughter of a bureaucrat. And so I could go to a school like Wharton. And like many kids who go to Wharton, I also sought a big branded company after I graduated, and ended up at McKinsey after some time at Microsoft, some rejections in the on-campus placement program, which I hope none of you go through. So I did my fair share of that, and I ended up at McKinsey, and then I did 3-4 years at a hedge fund. Now, there is a book that says, and I think Steve Jobs has used these words about hunger and foolishness. People always ask me, why did you make the move back from India to India from the US? In my case, I agree. It was a very unconventional move, because I have not lived in India. I went to public school for 3-4 years as a kid, and I have not lived in India. And no middle class parents, and I don't think my parents are any different, would be very excited about a kid going abroad, getting these big scholarships, having a pay package, surviving 2008 crisis, not losing their job, and then suddenly deciding to give it up and come back. So I remember them telling me, you should do this when you come back. You should come back to India, but come back as the MD of Goldman Sachs or something, like abhi mat aana, baad mein aana, something like that. And I said, nahi, mujhe to karna hai. And I think there is no strategic reason for it. I think it was, young blood is in some sense hungry and foolish. I constantly get bored every 3-4 years. The desire to do something new was there. And one thing is that, it is important to take risks in life, but it is also important to take sensible risks. So I have done and this sometimes people get confused, I've done my undergrad from Wharton. I actually never did. Wharton has a joint degree program in engineering and business called the M&T program, which is what I did. And the reason I'm saying this is I hadn't done my MBA. So I knew that if this whole business failed, I could go back and do the MBA. And for me, that was an important plan B. I don't believe in this thing कि life में सिर्फ एक plan A होना चाहिए, and if you don't achieve the plan A, the world comes to an end, because unfortunately in life plan A doesn't work out so much. On an unrelated note, you might want to know that my father, who is a foreign service officer, actually wanted to be an Indian forest service officer. He trained for botany, but he's basically blind in one eye. Okay, so he's got -12 power in one eye, so he failed the eyesight test and he ended up in the foreign service, right? That was his plan B, which most people think is ridiculous. I was like, thank God, I would have been growing up in some random forest if you were in the forest service. But I think plan A doesn't always work out. So I always had a plan B in mind, and thankfully plan A worked out. The other reason this is important is, I think there is just so much to do in India. I think as a young person, and this whole last 12, 15 months of this COVID period we've gone through convinces me that young India, if it chooses to hang out here, the opportunity to do so much in so many different industries is there. So I would end by saying I don't regret for a second the move I made back to India.
Ma'am, talking about coming back to India and starting the first hedge fund, which was Forefront, we remember. And again, you pioneered the concept of maybe something like an M&A in this space. But amongst all the larger peers, how did it eventually work with Edelweiss, which is more like a boutique period, and there were so many large institutions who would have wanted to get into a hedge fund space?
Okay, so when we were selling a company, and selling your own company is a very emotional decision. I mean, I think the day we finally sold Forefront Capital, you build something with love. And in our case, look, we were three young kids, and literally I've done everything from getting the bank account of this company open to getting the PAN card to opening to filing the documents with SEBI and writing each of them myself. So it is in that sense a labor of love, and selling it is a very thoughtful decision. Now, we actually kind of went through a very professional process with this. We had an investment banker, which was HDFC, and we went 9 companies, Vishal. We took about 10, 12 months to do this. And there were companies that were much bigger in Edelweiss in stature, and there were companies that were smaller in Edelweiss in stature. Now, I'll tell you something about financial services that is different from selling a tech company. When you sell a tech company or a consumer foods company, you sell the company and you go away. It's like selling a product. When you sell a financial services company and you are in the business of wealth management, people are buying the person's skill, the person's knowledge. So it is almost mandated that you don't just sell the company and go away and say, bye, here's my money and I've gone. You have to continue with the employer. So it is the continuing employment, and that continuing employment is 3-4 years at the minimum, right? So you have to choose a company not just for the money, but for the place to work. And I think that was finally the criteria we chose Edelweiss with. So I keep joking with Rashesh that when we were supposed to talk to Edelweiss, I told the banker, I said, I don't want to meet Edelweiss. I will deal with anyone except them, because I hear they're very, very aggressive. And I was actually quite rude at the beginning. I didn't go. I thought a lot of how. Ultimately, when I met Edelweiss, I realized they are very aggressive, but I am also very aggressive, and we are also very aggressive. So the cultural fit actually worked out. And which is why the 4-year period ended in 2018, and it's 2021, and we're still with Edelweiss.
Yeah, wonderful, ma'am. So, given it's a PGPM batch, there are so many, and PGPM batches would be having, say, an average experience of 10, 12 years. Many students would either want to pivot to other industries, or maybe want to start up on their own. What are the few things that you would definitely want to say, give your advice if students want to pivot to finance?
So I think there are, a few pieces. So entrepreneurship and starting in other industries is different. And I think this is a very personal call. I think if you're going down the route of entrepreneurship, here is my advice. You should do it, but you should not do it for the glamour of being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is not glamorous at all. In no way, shape, or form is it glamorous beyond the first few days. The startup valuations you read in the newspapers, that's the equivalent of Shah Rukh Khan making it as an outsider. For every Shah Rukh Khan you see,
Yeah.
don't do it for that. It is great and it is hard work and it is passion, and it's not a lot of money at a time when, by the way, all your other classmates are going to make a lot of money. I have gone through this with Forefront Capital when I moved back to India. My classmates were either sort of working with Goldman or McKinsey in India, or they were kids of promoters. And I moved back to Bombay and we couldn't afford a car because, you're not taking salaries. I mean, 2 years into Forefront Capital, I took a salary of 50,000 rupees a month. I mean, 50,000 rupees a month. And that doesn't do very much in Bombay. And so you make serious lifestyle compromises in terms of your versus your batchmates. And I promise you, it's easier said than done. So do it when you have an idea that you're convinced about, when you have people that you're convinced about. Don't do it for the glamour. The glamour fades out within 1 week of doing it. So I think that's my advice. Do it when you have a real idea. I think for people looking to move into different industries, that is always an option. I would just caution you, and I've gone through on-campus recruiting and had my share of stories. Your first job doesn't define how the rest of your career is going to be. In today's day and age, and my father is a headhunter, he's instantly an IIMA grad. I mean, most of us will have 4 or 5 careers in the span of our lives, and we probably don't even know what those careers are. So when I graduated from consulting, I didn't know selling SIPs for a living 15 years later. You don't know that, right? But if you get into something where you have an opportunity to learn, you're working with solid people, you will find ways to make the move. So just because you don't get your first job in private equity doesn't mean the world is ending and you'll never get into private equity. Any case, when you graduate, you don't have too much idea of what you want.
Okay, thank you. So talking about advice, one campaign that we, at least all the financial professionals remember, is the campaign of Edelweiss's Advice Zaruri Hai, which is like, in fact, Edelweiss's, if we talk about the marketing campaigns, you are considered like a Amul of the industry. So the way they relate. What we would want to understand from you as a CEO is what it takes when you are talking about, say, maybe creating a brand, and eventually from a boutique space today. During this journey, Edelweiss has actually taken over brands like JP Morgan or the AI business of Ambit. Financialization of saving is happening in India. So within the asset management space, how do you see your branding exercise, and also the way asset management industry is growing? As a CEO, how do you see Edelweiss moving in the next decade, capturing these trends?
Sure. So, firstly, I have to tell you an interesting story about branding. I joined this industry in 2017, the MF industry, and when I joined the industry, and I wasn't quite frankly the first candidate for the role because I don't have mutual fund experience. Apparently, my biggest weakness, I was told, was the fact that I didn't have a marketing and branding background, because I've been a money manager, and even in Forefront Capital, I have never done marketing, etc., etc. So everyone told me, "तुम ये नहीं कर पाओगी, ये तो तुम्हारा." And so it is very, very funny now that I have these conversations with people, and people assume that I know something about branding and marketing. So I think tremendous credit to the team. But I literally have learned marketing. I don't know any frameworks. I haven't read any books, and I haven't gone to any workshops. I think, branding is not taglines. Branding is not big budgets. It's not big advertising campaigns. It is standing for something and living that behavior every day. You can easily have a tagline. I can pay a great ad agency to come up with a tagline, but I have to live that behavior in the good times and in the bad times. Now, the business of money management can be a very simple business or a very complicated business. And I have learned that it is a very simple business. You make a product, and the product is going to deliver some kind of outcome basis markets, and you have to communicate what that outcome is likely to be and what that product is going to be to consumers, and you have to deliver 80-90% of that, and in the meantime you have to service the customer well, etc., and you have to do this with honesty. And that, I think, is what I want the brand to stand for, and that is what all our communication has been around. So I think, and in the last 3-4 years, it's been a tremendous, and we've made our share of mistakes. It's been a tremendous learning experience. But I want Edelweiss to stand for a very, very honest brand. Ultimately, people are handing over hard-earned money to us. I don't need us to be the biggest brand in the world, this brand, most media covered, but at least, and I don't need us to be the best performing brand in the world that is delivering outsized returns and all this alpha male stuff. I don't buy it. I don't think that stuff exists. I just want us to be a brand that you trust and you like. Someone once told me a bit of marketing advice that I think is very useful. And he said that you should build a brand that people fall in love with and they want to see succeed. So, like, if the brand was a person, you would want to hang out with the person. You would like, yeah, I want him to do well. Yeah, acha lagta hai, when this guy does well. And I hope that's what Edelweiss is. So what gives me a lot of joy is, I mean, we've grown from 5,000 to probably 55,000 crores in the last 4 years. But whenever we go through any milestones, there's so much love and affection we get from the advisory community and from investors and, all of that. So I think we want to build a brand that people love. And that encompasses everything, right? And financial services brands are not that often. There are lots of brands that are very big, but nobody seems to love them. Consumer companies do this. Like Apple's a brand people love. They'll defend it with their heart, right? So you want to build a brand that people love.
Ma'am, how do you see the way asset management industry is moving, the way AMCs are becoming bigger and bigger, the way financialization of saving is happening? How do you see Edelweiss capturing these trends?
So I think asset management is like a 5 to 7 year old kid that is as an industry that is growing up. Vishal, you know this data, but I think it's worth sharing for the audience. Mutual fund penetration as a percentage of GDP in this country is about 10%. US, let's forget. World average is 40%. So we have to, हमें 10 से 40 का जो फासला है, that journey of 10 to 40 at the minimum, we have to capture. Which is why I think, and I have worked in global markets and Indian markets. I'm probably the most vocal in saying, please don't apply what happens in the US to India, because we are like the US markets of the 80s, which means that the opportunity is incredible. And it's incredible if you're HDFC mutual fund who's at the top of the game. Yeah. And it's incredible if you're Edelweiss mutual fund, which is at 15th rank. And it's really good even if you're at the 25th rank in the business, because ranks move in this business. So this whole thing of he is late, this is late, nobody is late. The business is like a 5-year-old. It doesn't really matter, right? And that's also the reason I find some of these debates like active investing, passive investing, smart beta, dumb beta, all this kind of senseless, because it makes sense in a US financially evolved context. It doesn't make sense in a country where you actually are trying to move people from bank accounts and physical savings and gold to financial assets. Whether he comes into a debt mutual fund, equity mutual fund, something in the middle, it doesn't matter. He has to come into a mutual fund first. So I think that's the role we play. As far as Edelweiss mutual fund, I think we are very clear about what we want to do, what we don't want to do. We want to build products that are useful for consumers. I think if you look at our vision statement, it's to build financial solutions, of course, financial because we're in that business. Solutions because anything you launch has to be useful to someone. Otherwise, we in the financial industry can keep launching. It has to be useful. It has to meet some need. And the second part is solutions that deliver enduring value. So it can't be something that's good today, it disappears tomorrow. It has to be something that has a little timeless quality. So that's how I sort of see our journey.
Being on the asset management side, ma'am, I had seen the way Edelweiss has grown in your leadership. But an equally important accolade that should be is you getting shortlisted for the Bharat bond issuance when you were competing with the HDFCs and all the behemoths of the world. I would actually want, ma'am, your experience of that particular success and also your first time experience of maybe coordinating with all the government departments and how the success was when it finally you got shortlisted.
Yeah, there's some very good stories, and Bharat Bond is probably deserving of a book in itself. I think as far as shortlisting, look, we applied and we applied on a lark, thinking कि हमें मिलने तो वाला नहीं है, लेकिन apply to karte hain, we learn something, and by chance, one of my sales heads told me, Radhika, if we get this by chance, because we applied when we were 10,000 crore AUM, and the mandate is a 10,000 crore mandate. He's like, even if on that 10,000 crore mandate we raise 5,000 crores, we'll be in a different orbit in life. So we went and we went for the bidding. And there were 4 other AMCs, 2 state-owned ones and 2 other very large ones. And when we got shortlisted, Mint had a huge article, oh, this little baby AMC is a surprising thing. So we went to the bidding room and I nearly missed. I mean, this is the conspiracy of the universe. It was a very foggy time in Delhi. So my flight nearly didn't land, but we ended up making it. And we were the last guys to do the presentation. One AMC flipped their slot. And before we were going in, one of the larger competitors came to us and he said, if you guys get this mandate, tum logo se manage bhi ho payega ya nahi? Will you be able to manage it? And we were like, okay, we are still going to do it. So we went in, we did the presentation, and I think our presentation was 10 minutes. Everybody else's was 40 minutes. But my colleague, I was presenting. So my colleague who was with me in the presentation, he said, Radhika, we've got it at the end. I said, there is no way. It was a 10-minute presentation. Everybody else spoke for 40 minutes, but he was damn confident. And, we didn't have distribution, we didn't have brand, but what we did have is a very good product structure. And I also believe that sometimes constraints bring out the best in you. When you don't have brand, when you have so many weaknesses, you put all your energy into the one thing you can, which is, I think, what worked for us, and probably a very sincere and honest presentation. We spent a year after winning, and then obviously we were splashed all over the media after that. We spent a year after that working with Government of India on this. I would count that year as probably the most memorable year of my career so far. I think people have lots of misconceptions about how government works, but honestly, it was a delight. My counterpart in government actually remains a very close friend today. We worked with people from around the world to understand different bond ETFs and then decide what was right from India. We got approval from 17 ministries. So I had a chance to work with everyone from shipping ministry to housing ministry to Niti Aayog. Did 50 trips to Delhi, as I have said before. Wrote 700 pieces of documentation to get cabinet approval. So really everything. And then I should tell you, perhaps the most memorable day of my career was cabinet approval happened because this product needs approval by the cabinet. And at 12 o'clock, I got a call from my counterpart in Delhi in government that cabinet approval has happened. So we were all screaming on our floor. And then there was some announcement that day, the cabinet had also approved Citizens Amendment Act, CAA.
Okay.
Then they were saying that, okay, at 12:30, there's some press con with Prakash Javadekar and Nirmala Sitharaman on CAA. And we thought it was on CAA, etc., etc. We then see at 12:30, and our office has TV screens all over, that the finance minister is announcing Bharat Bond. And I think, Vishal, that moment of watching a product that you had built and your team seeing the finance minister launch it, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, I think these are the kind of things you live for.
I remember those 2.5 months when we used to speak to our Edelweiss counterparts. They would explain how the senior management was almost at all the times in the flight only. Maybe traveling. And I remember those 2 months were very, very terrible for you also, very, very hectic. How did you eventually celebrate post that? Did you take some off or like off from work and everything?
I did. I took a little time off to go to Mangalore after the deployment, and then I came back, and then we had the listing ceremony of Bharat Bond at NSE. Again, incredibly sort of memorable. So all these moments, I think, are things that you live for in your career. I mean, they're just incredible moments.
I'm sure, ma'am, there'll be more to come. So now, talking about the digital revolution in India, we are seeing maybe the digital penetration happening at a never before pace. In fact, pandemic has definitely given maybe tailwind to that. If you look at, you spoke about how we are differentiated when we compare to US markets or a China market in terms of our penetration. But a larger challenge that we see is when it comes to the lower income group, or even a large part of India's saving lies in FDs and LICs. So, ma'am, what can actually be done to address this? Because I do not know whether they are the best products or not, but definitely mutual funds need to have the right share. So what could possibly be done to address this?
Yeah, so two parts to that question. One is, I think, a product question. Second is a delivery question. So I think on products, yes, I think FD and LIC, etc., have done a fantastic job in penetrating, because FD, what I like about FD is that it is a very simple product. इतने साल में आपको इतना मिल जाएगा. I think we in debt mutual funds have a long way. We actually have a tax advantage over FDs, as you know, Vishal. But our products have been historically very, very complicated, right? So, if you invest in a debt fund, you don't know itne saal mein itna milega, subject to RBI doing this and interest rates. I mean, if I'm investing for 3 years or 5 years for some personal goal, why do I care what is happening? Bharat Bond and its passive structure and some of the products we've done after that is an attempt to simplify that. As I say at Edelweiss AMC, we are trying to bring back the fixed income. We are trying to make things simple because I think that's what FD's got right. So I think one simpler products will definitely help. On digital, I think COVID has been transformational. I mean, our business has gone from about 55% digital transactions to 90 plus percent digital transactions. And I think for a younger entrant like us, the old belief was you needed to have huge infrastructure and huge branches, et cetera, to sort of build a scalable business. And now, as I said, each mobile phone is a branch that we have. And it's just about, so and I'm a computer science person by background, but obviously had been very out of touch. In the last 6 months, I've probably been CTO of the firm because I've spent so much time doing work on our digital properties, and I expect to keep doing that going forward. So I think there's a great opportunity to deliver digitally and simplify products. If we can do these two things, I think we're in very good shape.
Ma'am, before I actually go to my next question, there's an interesting question from one of our Radhika. She has posted, there's a lot of mistrust or lack of confidence in mutual funds today. So how it would be addressed? I see SEBI has done a tremendous job and even AMCs are doing a tremendous job in having that confidence. But I would like to hear from you, what can be done that trust element comes in?
So it is interesting. And I think financial literacy is one of the answers. And I think mutual funds doing things is the other part of the answer. The problem today, and Vishal, you well know this, is that we live in a very media and social media exaggerated world. A single event happens with one mutual fund, and we assume all mutual funds are bad, which is unfortunately very unfair. I think what we can do as an industry and what we've been trying to do is be a lot more out there and communicate with people. This is not a sale of toothpaste. It's not even a sale of an insurance product. It's an ongoing open-ended product. I think you need to be out there to communicate. So one thing I've told the team is if a fund is doing badly, definitely send an email to the investor. We just did an open house this Friday where we had huge turnout, where fund managers were actually talking to retail investors directly. So I think communication is the solution. I mean, there are a ton of myths. Is investing in an equity mutual fund less risky than investing in direct stocks? Of course it's not. It's actually, I mean, more risky? No, it's not. It's actually less risky because a professional is doing the same job and he's probably going to hold 50 stocks versus you holding 10 stocks. So there's a lot of myths. The other thing that we're trying to do is build our element of youth engagement because a lot of this comes from Young India. So we're specifically trying to work with youth influencers. So I just did a show in Hindi, by the way, but this guy yesterday, Beer Biceps guy, and where we are talking about personal finance in like absolute basics in Hindi to kind of get some of the myths out of young people's minds. So I think the simple and short answer is communication, communication, communication.
In fact, ma'am, like SEBI's recent circular of maybe trying to a little align the interests also, whereby a lot of compensation can go in terms of units. If you can just share that, and how does that also help in this question?
Okay, so and my views on the circular have been splashed too much in the media, but I think what the regulator is asking is not a bad ask, which is that all of us essentially invest in the products that we manufacture. I, in any case, by the way, invest 70%. 70% of my investments are in the products of investment. It's good that the regulator is doing this. But by the way, most asset managers do it because we love the products we manufacture. And, I don't need a regulation or some law. If my employees like what they're doing, think that they're doing good work, they will buy their own products. I mean, why should they not, right? Do I need a law to tell them to do that? I don't think so. I mean, that they've brought in a law is great, but I don't think you need a law to do that.
Sure. Ma'am, you're talking about connecting with the young people. So one interesting thing that I see is within the Young India is maybe one investing overseas that may have to do with the recency bias of like US market had been doing great, tech has been doing great, but Edelweiss as a brand is bringing those very nice ideas without we have to go through those LRS and complicated routes. If you can share that, what is actually leading to that? You are leading the front practically across the AMCs. So what is that particular strategy?
Yeah, and that is something we have been doing. And the reason we've been doing it is something I said earlier, which is that we are trying to give you products that solve problems. Now, this is a problem. I want to invest abroad. LRS is complicated. It has high ticket sizes. I want to do it simply sitting from India. Why can't Edelweiss provide a solution? We were lucky we acquired JP Morgan AMC and we had got a basket of international funds. It was a very small basket, some 150 crores. And people used to tell me, Madam, इन्हें बंद कर दो यार, इसमें कौन खरीदेगा? And I think in the last year, Vishal, I have never answered as many questions as I have on international investing in the past. So today at Edelweiss Mutual Fund, we provide you access to about 80% of the world's investment markets. We are probably the only asset manager in the country that lets you invest in a China dedicated fund, regardless of what your patriotic sentiments on China are. We are probably we're the first asset manager in the country that has a fund focused on disruptive technology. Now, of course, lots of people are launching it. But you know, in India, technology is IT services. All the sort of new age tech companies, whether it's Paytm or the content companies, etc., are not listed yet, but they are listed in the US. And you know, we don't need to talk to this audience about what technology has done for us in the last year. So we provide you access to companies like that. You know, I mean, our portfolio will have not only FANG stocks, but something like a Tinder or diagnostics companies or semiconductor companies, etc., or digital advertising companies. Provide you access to that. We provide you access to emerging markets. I would encourage all young Indians to look at investing abroad after they have done their basics of investing in India. My only request is don't do it for the recent returns. Understand the market and then do it. And please do it with a long-term time horizon.
Absolutely, ma'am. So amongst my SIPs, ma'am, I'm invested in both the funds.
Okay, very good.
The China one and the US one. So, ma'am, now next question would be, so we have seen actually last 14 months had been very, very interesting. So maybe we started last year, February, March was like a horrific period when even the savvy investors were thinking whether they should be investing in equity at all or not. In fact, their risk appetite had gone to the minimum. There was a tremendous slide in the market and so was their risk appetite. Now in last 12 months or so, we are seeing a market glide, and accordingly what has happened, many investors are actually underestimating their risk tolerance. So I would say the feeling is of FOMO, whereby they don't want to miss out. Everybody is scrambling for FANG stocks. How would you suggest to manage these emotional biases and maybe invest in a disciplined way in this dynamic world of finance? Or I would also want the second part would be, what's your asset allocation?
Okay, so I'll talk about my asset allocation second. I'll tell you some good advice Rashesh gave at the town hall. And in a country like India, so firstly, remember that when you live in India, equity investing is generally very volatile, right? India is extremely volatile. It is a very dramatic country. We are dramatic about our films, we are dramatic about our cricketers, and we are dramatic about our markets. एक दिन यहाँ market 3% गिर जाता है and we all think the world is going to end. And एक दिन 10% बढ़ जाता है and अच्छे दिन आ गए हैं and you know we are XYZ. So there's a lot of drama around you, but you have to cut the drama in your investing. And so what he said is, don't be too happy, don't overestimate the good times, and don't extrapolate the bad times. You have to cut the extent of drama in life and be more like an average. Because the reality is markets do deliver about 10-12% on average, but they don't deliver it in 10-10-10-10 slots. They deliver it in plus 30, minus 30. So have an investment strategy and stick to it. Write down what your investment strategy is and write down what matters to you and stick to it, and then switch off the news and don't spend so much time on WhatsApp groups. I keep saying that mutual fund NAVs fall once a day, but it feels like they fall 10 times a day because you get notifications on Twitter and 3 WhatsApp groups will speak and your college friends will say this and money control app will pop up. And then at the end of the day, the NAV has fallen. But by that time in your head, the NAV has fallen 10 times. So don't add to volatility in your life. For instance, and the thing to remember for young professionals is, remember that personal finance is personal first. It's a well-known quote. You know, we are very driven by FOMO. अच्छा दोस्त ने ये किया तो ये करना चाहिए, दोस्त ने ये किया तो वो करना चाहिए. personal finance cannot be about what your father did or what your friend did, etc., etc. It's really unique to each individual. Now, you asked about my asset allocation. You'll be surprised to know I'm a capital markets girl, but my asset allocation is very conservative. And the reason it's very conservative is my husband works in the same business. And all my income is equity market linked. In years of good equity markets, our AUMs grow, our returns are high, our ESOP, I get paid in employee stock options, that grows. But in bad years, all of it collapses, and it happens to my husband too. So we want a sense of balance in our life. So I hold probably a significant part of my portfolio in balanced advantage funds, which for those who don't know are funds that have a mix of equity and debt, like 65 equity, 35 debt, and it keeps alternating. That's my favorite category of fund. And then I have SIPs into two other things. One is mid and small cap funds, because that's my growth. And the third is international funds, and I have some emerging market funds and some developed market funds. So that's broadly how I operate. I only hold mutual funds. I can't hold direct stocks except Edelweiss, and I don't buy real estate outside a primary house.
One question that everybody today has on mind on the cryptos. If you have any views on cryptos, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm learning crypto and I'm not smart enough to understand it. And every young person asks me questions about crypto, which I'm probably not well prepared to answer. I would say though, regardless of how much noise there is around crypto, it's not a regulated asset class for Indian investors. So I can't responsibly tell you to go invest in crypto. I would tell young people one thing, yaar, 80% of investments, now money is hard earned. 80% of investments have to be घर का खाना, दाल चावल दही चावल, whatever. 20% में अगर आपको बाकी कुछ करना है to have fun, please do. But really 80% of life has to be dal chawal.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful advice. So you're role model to so many of us. As Anupama mentioned, you are being followed by so many. We would want to know who is your role model, ma'am.
So there's multiple parts to this. I don't have singular role models. I like to pick up good qualities in each person. So, for instance, when we did the Forefront acquisition, there's a gentleman on the Edelweiss board, and he worked with us very extensively. And he had this quality I called statesmanship. Like he would walk into a room and without shouting, he could, with the look of his eyes and his walk, convince the whole room to listen to him. So I said, yeah, mujhe na statesman banna hai, Rujan jaisa. Then I have had another boss who's a great people's person. So I try to pick up these qualities in people. And, if I think someone's very good at something, then I'll go ask him, how do you do it? And they're usually, if you ask someone about why they're good at something, they are very happy to talk about it and give you tips. So I do this. I also think, for most of us, probably the best role models we have can be our parents. I think in my case, they certainly they are. And I think we tremendously underrate them. So you will see in a lot of my talks, in a lot of my conversations, probably the best lessons I've learned are from my mother and father. They've both built exemplary lives and careers. So I think that's that. And probably the third thing, if I had to name an individual whose career trajectory I've liked, just because it aligns with what I want to do, is Nandan Nilekani, because I think and I know he's a Bangalore guy, he's someone who's done a fantastic job in the private sector and then spent a great deal of time in the public sector, not donating money, but donating time and energy and administrative brilliance to do something transformational for the country. So if I think of the career I may want to have one day, I think that's a career that I really admire.
Ma'am, there are so many questions that are hitting the chat box. Before we start addressing them, I would like to have one quick fire questions with you. So there'll be two options. You have to quickly, as a CEO, just answer one of them and maybe add a line why you've chosen that. So I'll be asking you 4 questions. First 3 would be more professional.
Afterwards, these rapid fires are subject to sending me a hamper.
Nevertheless, I'll put you in the spot. So the first question is, what is your aspiration as a CEO? Largest AMC or the most popular AMC?
Oh, most popular, most loved.
Quality you look for when hiring, EQ or IQ?
EQ.
Post-pandemic way of working, work from home or work from office?
Hybrid for sure.
Okay. And last one is Netflix or PVR way of life?
Actually, neither. I read books.
Okay. So in fact, just to share with the larger audience, so we actually find a lot of challenge in terms of reading the entire books. So actually advice comes out with those book summaries. If you can now, ma'am, just share that.
Please go to our website and check out the insight section. It has hundreds of book summaries and an audio format also.
Yeah, that's what. So ma'am, I would like to invite my cohort member, Anisha. So there are so many audience questions that she would like to handle.
Thank you so much, Vishal. And we have a lot of questions for you, Radhika ma'am. We have a few people on YouTube as well. There are about totally 200 participants for this meeting. Before we start, I just wanted to check if Gopal sir is still there in the meeting and if he wanted to speak a few words. Let me continue with the questions. So there were a lot of interesting questions, and I'm going to collate all of them together so that we get maximum benefit. And one question which has come out is, as a woman who fight a lot of battles daily, and you also talk about alpha males and women coming back to careers after they've had their leaves, pregnancy leaves, or any such leave. How do you think, what kind of a message would you want to give them?
Okay, so this is a good question. I'm going to give you two messages. One is recognize that it is going to be hard. And it is, regardless of what any bloody book or any talk says, in talking to many, many women leaders across countries and across, seniority, it is hard. It is hard to be the minority. It is hard to be the only girl when there are 30 other CEOs. You will feel days of irritation. You will feel days where you feel people don't take you seriously because you're a woman. You'll feel days of being left out. I had a meltdown 2 days ago because I was on some meeting of CEOs and I was like, these guys just don't give me a chance to talk. So all this is going to happen, and just accept that it is going to happen. It's a bitter pill you have to swallow. The second advice, though, I would give you is don't make a big deal about it, right? Because you can either choose to live your life thinking, I'm a woman, this is such a big liability, life sucks, or you can milk and make the best out of it. As a woman, you bring a lot of different things in terms of skill set to the table. And, with so much diversity push in corporates, my co-founder told me this: if you are an exceptionally hardworking woman today, you actually have an advantage because there are so few of you out there. And I keep thinking that because of my gender, I get more media coverage, more attention, more opportunity to meet people. So I think if you carry it as an advantage, people will treat it as an advantage. If you carry it as a liability and as a victim, then people will treat it. And remember, you may be grappling with the fact, I mean, you guys are all at I Am Bangalore, right? I asked a bunch of people on my Twitter handle, what are the kind of career questions and issues that they grapple with? The single biggest one was people who felt insecure that they didn't have a branded degree, right? You guys don't have that, right? So someone may be grappling with the fact that she's a woman. Someone may be grappling with the fact that they're short. Someone may be dealing with the fact that they don't have a branded degree. So, realize that also, put that into perspective.
That's actually great advice and quite realistic. So you spoke about how it's important to educate youth also about financial literacy. There are a few questions about how that can be done. Although there are a lot of messages that the financial literacy has to be delivered, but not how or how far can they go.
So there is a lot of conversation about how personal finance should be taught in schools. I can't go reform the school system. I think it probably should be taught in 11th or 12th grade. But the good news is, you don't have to wait for the school system to change as a young individual. There are so many personal finance resources out there. I mean, Twitter in itself is a monster and mecca of finance learning. There are so many books, there are so many guidebooks that you can learn. My one advice to young people on personal finance is the best thing you can do is start. Whenever you start earning, even if you have an internship and you save 1,000 rupees or 2,000 rupees, start investing it, because you will learn You will make mistakes when you are young. You don't learn in paper education. You learn by putting it to practice. So just start.
True. I think practice is the most important factor. Um, One question from YouTube that we have is growth of asset management in India is tied up with country's economy and financial markets. What does the next decade for India's economic growth look like? And how do you think COVID has affected it?
So I think COVID has been a hiccup in growth, but it is a natural hiccup in the part of our journey. And I think economies go through this. So I have no doubt that the economy will bounce back. I think, the outcome of COVID has shown some dichotomy. So it's actually been very good for the financial services industry. We probably had record years in the last year, and it's been very poor for some traditional industries like hospitality, etc., and the obvious ones. I think if financial services can continue to increase its amount of digital delivery, it has lots of scope. Even if the economy goes nowhere, just the fact that penetration has to go from 10 to 40, as I said, is a tremendous opportunity for the financial services industry. The whole trend of financialization of savings is not going anywhere. And you have seen enough precedences of this in markets like US and China. As an economy goes, your grows, your holding in physical assets like real estate and gold comes down, and people become more aspirational and look at financial assets.
Okay. And one question is, how did you find your passion in finance and asset management? Did it evolve over time, or was it there right from the beginning?
That's a very good question. I am glad someone asked this. I think a lot of people are told, find your passion, find your passion. And, some people find their passion in childhood. कि मुझे तो बड़े होके actress बनना है, मुझे बड़े होके photographer बनना है. I wasn't one of those. I was a good student who was good at math and science and literature, like many of us are, and like many of you will be. But I don't come from a corporate background, right? My father was in government. My mother has been a school educator, right? And that's what the whole family's background has been. So I never grew up with this. My finding my passion was like an arranged marriage. I joined consulting and then I joined financial services, and I happen to like the profession and I've stayed. And I would tell you that you don't need to force fit passion. Passion can be found over time, right? And even within financial services, I started as a fund manager, which is probably the most glamorous part. But now I take on a more business role because I've also realized that I don't want to sit. So if you look at my husband and I, we've done the same degrees and we both started off as fund managers. He still stayed a fund manager. I'm in a business role. He's the kind of guy who likes to read valuation books on a weekend for fun. That's clearly his passion and he belongs there. I like working with people. I like dealing with the media. I like the technology side of the business. I like the sales side of the business. I like a much more rounded. So as I have grown, as I have experienced different things, I've also understood my personality and what works for me. And I think that's all of our journey. So don't force fit yourself to find your passion and don't feel bad if you don't have a passion. You'll find one. I mean, hundreds and thousands of people in this country have arranged marriages because they don't meet the love of their life and it works perfectly fine, right? You grow to love the person you marry, you grow to love the profession you have.
That is true. And it's an amazing analogy. I've never heard of it before. One of the question is from Vinod Chanol.
Can I go and take a minute with Radhika?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Radhika, I think thank you very much. I may drop off anytime. I teach an elective called Managing Career Success Transition, not for experienced students for whom I'm the chair, but particularly for youngsters, the fresh MBAs. Very well attended. I think I summarize whatever you told last 45 minutes is what I summarized in the whole course. So authentic and so true. Second thing I want to tell you is that your journey is what I think most of our students in the weekend MBA, even full-time MBAs go through over the period of 2 years. They're not as privileged or as lucky you have been, but they're in their own way, they're earning their degree and
Can't hear you, sir.
Okay. Meanwhile, let me try and fit one more question.
Sorry, I'm there. I just want to share two learnings. Before you end, maybe one minute each, you can tell what challenges and failures you learned and how you grew. This generation is going through that. You may like to share that. And second thing for you is this weekend MBA people, I have done a study on them, mid-career professionals. Brand definitely helps them, growth happens. But if they plan to consolidate and move ahead, few tips towards the end. Thank you very much. I just want to acknowledge your kind presence and looking forward to see you in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. I'll take both his questions. And so I think mine and most successful professionals' journey is a journey of a lot of failures and career challenges. And what I want to tell you is that it is inevitable. A good career will put you through periods of absolute hell. There's probably one day a month and this happened to me as recently as Friday, where you just want to give up completely. And it happens at the senior level and it happens at the junior level. You have to build resilience in your career. Failure is going to happen, rejection is going to happen, and really bad days are going to happen. The one thing I would tell young people is, and we see a lot of this, is they give up very easily. अच्छा बॉस नहीं है, चलो गिव अप कर लो. 6 महीने प्रोजेक्ट अच्छा नहीं है, गिव अप कर लो. 1 bad year of appraisals, गिव अप कर लो. Life doesn't work like that. You get disproportionate upside. In finance, what we call the power of compounding kicks in when you give something time. And it also means living through a couple of market corrections. So it also means living through a couple of corrections in your career. So that's the one thing I would say. The second question was to mid-career professionals and some of the kind of transitions that they are making. I think mid-career is a time when you should have clarity on what matters to you. I think when you're a new graduate from an MBA, you chase, and not to judge anyone, you chase money and brand and all the things that we all chased in campuses. But I think by the time you are mid-career, the one piece of advice is have tremendous clarity on what you want to do. For instance, in my case, and I'm frequently approached for jobs, I know what matters to me. For instance, I'm the kind of person who can't work with a boss who micromanages me. I will just go crazy. No matter how much money you pay me, I will go crazy. Secondly, I'm heavily motivated by impact. I want to do something that affects a large number of people. That is me. So if you pay me a lot of money for something that, influences 5 people or is very, very niche, it just doesn't excite me. I have now 15 years in, you have to have clarity about what you want to do, and that will help you make better choices.
Thank you, ma'am. I agree with you. Micromanagement is something which none of us want to work with. And one last question, given that we have already reached almost the end of the session, is Vinod Chenoy had asked that he feels that being from a finance background, there is a bit of a disadvantage. He aspires to be a CEO or MD one day, but he might have a disadvantage because others have other degrees and that will give them that leverage. What is your advice to people who want to be a CEO from finance background?
I don't think it is a disadvantage. I don't think any background can be a disadvantage if you plan your career well. It's the same argument that people say if you don't have a branded IIM degree, you can't be a CEO. There are hundreds of CEOs. There's so many examples of people who are CEOs who don't have branded degrees. It's the same example of you can't be a marketing person and make it. Don't buy that. And this stuff roams around, and I've been a victim to this stuff roams. If you don't start in investment banking, you'll never make it to private equity. ये जो formula है ना, इनसे life चलती नहीं है. ये campus पे बहुत चलते हैं, लेकिन इन formula से life नहीं चलती है. If you do want to be a CEO and in a particular domain, strategically think about your skill set. Think about what I need to do to be a CEO 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and start augmenting those different parts of your skill set. Start getting those experiences. Anyway, in today's world, there's nothing you can't learn. So don't believe these formulas of, career is not X times Y equals Z. It doesn't work that way. There is no one Google Maps formula. You can choose the car, you can choose the speed, you can choose the road. to go from A to B. And there are enough different examples of going from A to B that work.
That is quite true. I think striving to do hard work is the way which might help us get somewhere. Thank you so much, Radhika ma'am. I think you addressed a lot of the questions. There are a lot more questions. We couldn't get them addressed. And I apologize to the participants who asked these questions. And I would want to convey the thanks from Gopal sir. He has put it on the chat also. Thank you, Radhika ma'am, for the valuable insights that you have shared. Now, let me hand it over to Anvesha to take over the closing part.
Thank you so much, Anisha. Thank you, ma'am, for primarily accepting our invitation and for the webinar. And thank you, PGP-EM, for Vishal and team for such a wonderful organization of the webinar. And I understand a lot of questions have not been answered. So the Center for Capital Markets and Risk Management is working closely on a platform for investors' education. That is in collaboration with the National Stock Exchange of India. We will definitely be happy if everybody can put up their questions on the platform for investors' education. We'll reach out to Radhika ma'am, and I'm sure y'all can get your questions answered that way. And do check out the platform for investors' education, as personal finance is very important, especially if you are a young investor. So that is a platform which is a collection of audios, videos, podcasts, speaker sessions. And we'll have Ms. Radhika's session also uploaded on the platform for investors' education. And I'm sure it will be very helpful for everyone. Thank you so much to all our online viewers. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, PGP-EM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Bye.